Hi, and welcome. You're listening to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 1607B, and today's date is July 3rd, 2018, and the title of the episode is, We Have the Server Tracking It All Cornered. Let's get into the economic collapse, political, and geopolitical news. Now, as we know, Facebook, they are under scrutiny from the federal government. And the federal government is ramping up its scrutiny of Facebook's role in the Cambridge Analytica data privacy scandal because we now have another federal agency that is looking into Facebook, and that is the Securities and Exchange Commission. They have joined the Federal Trade Commission, the FBI, the Department of Justice, in their investigation of the tech giant. Now, the involvement of so many agencies confirms that the investigation is broadening in scope. Now, the FTC disclosed in March that it had launched an investigation into whether Facebook had violated a consent decree over its handling of personal data, a violation that could potentially lead to more than $1 trillion in fines. And when we look at Mark Zuckerberg and his Facebook transactions where he was dumping stock, we see why the SEC might be involved with this, because they might be looking at that, because they're looking at the timing of when he was actually dumping the stock, I should say, because he knew that Facebook was going to be looked at, and he got a heads up, and he started to dump a lot of his stock because he knew that the stock was going to go down. So we see right now that Facebook is in big trouble, and it's just not getting better. It is getting worse for Facebook. And we need to remember that Q did mention that Facebook and many of the other social media companies were going to be involved in a scenario just like this. And Facebook seems to be one of the first that is having this huge problem here. We see Peter Strzok. Well, he was going to give testimony in front of Congress, and it was going to be publicized. And now Peter Strzok has changed his mind. He doesn't want to do this right now. His attorney is saying that this is a trap and he should not be publicly testifying in front of Congress, and he is declining to do so at this point. We see that the judge in the Flynn case, and we know that Mueller wanted to put this off once again because he really has no evidence whatsoever. We understand that Strzok and others have changed and manipulated 302s, and they changed a lot of it. But the judge has now set the hearing for July 10th and says that Flynn should be there. And there is a notice of electronic filing. The case is USA versus Flynn, case number. And it says that July 10th at 10 a.m. in courtroom 24A, Flynn is directed to attend, and it's signed by Judge Emmett G. Sullivan. And it looks like we're moving forward with this, and we'll have to see what happens. Now, Q is saying that Flynn is going to be getting off. There's really no evidence whatsoever, and I think this is why Mueller continually kicks the can down the street, because he has nothing to show the judge, just like in the case with the Russian company where he indicted like 13 Russians. That's not going too well either, because he really had no evidence with that. He never thought they'd show up. So it looks like Mueller is kind of stuck in this whole entire Russian collusion scenario, which none of these things have to do with Russian collusion. Now, we understand that Merkel was having problems with her own party, and it all had to do with the refugees, the illegals coming into the country, and Merkel right now has surrendered her migration policy in a deal with the Conservative Party leader. Now, this plan, if implemented in its present form, reduces Germany's refugee liability almost to nothing. Since, given Germany's geography, it is not on the front lines of the waves of migration, as those migrants need to travel through another EU nation to get to Germany, and if Germany is turning away asylum seekers who have filed for the asylum in another EU nation, and a secondary migration is not permitted, then Germany could realistically expect not to see further waves of migrants. Merkel has lost in a big way, and the anti-migrant interests have won, not just at home but across the bloc. She has conceded much and nearly lost her handle on power, which is largely maintained through acquiescence to the demands of other countries in the Union. So we see at this point that Merkel is in trouble. A lot of her party is not with her, and the people are not really with her. And you can see that she is stuck at this point, and we'll have to see how this all plays out later on moving forward here. We see Iran, the president of Iran, Rouhani, he says he's committed to the nuclear deal as long as we have the feeling that we can profit from the advantages given to Iran. And we know that the Iranian president met with the Swiss counterpart in Zurich, and the Swiss president, Alain Berset, agreed, saying that his country respects the deal, adding, "We really agree with President Rouhani on underlining the importance of stable relations in respect of international law." And I believe what the Iranian president is doing right now is going around trying to get people on his side to make it profitable for Iran. And again, they want to receive payment. Remember, Obama was sending payments to Iran, and this had nothing to do with their funds because they put it on to planes on, pallets of cash. Congress really didn't know anything about this, and they were just giving it to Iran. So we see at this point, Iran is trying to get those funds continually coming into the country. And if they can't get the funds coming into the country, I don't think this deal is going to stay alive. We see Russian troops right now. They have arrived in Busra al-Sham, and the rebels are preparing to hand over their heavy weaponry and their medium weapons. Now, this area is very important because it's located just north of the Jordanian border and directly west of the al-Shwida government. And with Busra al-Sham under reconciliation deal, the Syrian government will have full control of the al-Shwida provincial border for the first time in several years. And we understand that the Syrian armed forces, they have made a huge amount of gains in their country, especially in the southern area of Syria. And right now, 27 settlements in the southern Syria area have returned to the government control over the past week. And Syria is calling on all displaced citizens to return to the liberated areas. All those areas where they removed the terrorist factions, they want them to return, and it looks like this is definitely happening right now. Now, very interestingly, Senator Graham decided to visit Syria, and he's trying to make a case right now. Remember, Graham and McCain, or Q likes to call him No Name, they've traveled together to many of these areas like Ukraine, Syria, and they pushed war in all of these areas. Right now, Graham is insisting that the U.S. needs to stay to help. Help with what? If you look what Obama has done over the last 8 years he was in office, they've destroyed Syria, destroyed Iraq, destroyed Libya, destroyed all these areas. So what are they going to help with? The best thing that can happen here is that the U.S. leaves Syria. And Graham is out there trying to make a case saying if the U.S. leaves the U.S., like Trump wants the troops to leave, it's going to be terrible for Syria. No, it's going to be good for Syria. They have everything under control. They almost have their country back. And the people are coming back. And the people elected Assad. Let their people decide where they want their country to go. The U.S. right now has invaded Syria because we see right now that the Damascus government, they're out there saying that the United States must withdraw its forces from Syria, stressing its military presence in Syria is no longer makes any sense whatsoever, since the Syrian government and the Russian forces have made huge successes on the ground in Syria and liberated many, many areas and pretty much gotten rid of the paid mercenary forces in Syria. Now, the Syrian parliamentary secretary said the United States can no longer keep its forces in Syria since it gains no benefits from it. And that's the whole point. Remember, the reason they told us that the U.S. was in Syria was to get rid of the Islamic State, which we know was completely fake, phony, and false. We knew that Obama was supporting the Islamic State. Now the Islamic State is beaten. Al-Nusra is beaten. Al-Qaeda is beaten. The moderate rebels, as they call them, they're surrendering. They're handing over their weapons. Why is the United States in Syria? There's no reason for it. At this point, it looks like the U.S. and the coalition forces invaded Syria. And when a country is telling you you must get out and you don't, it doesn't look good on the world stage. And I think this is why Trump has said that it is time to get out of Syria. When Trump meets with Putin, I think this is going to be discussed. And I think we're going to see the troops removed from Syria and all borders closed down. Right now, they are closing the borders with Jordan. They're closing and setting up barbed wire with Lebanon. They have the borders controlled with Iraq. They're controlling all the borders so the deep state can't push the Islamic State from Syria to Iraq or Lebanon to Syria or Syria to Lebanon. They're closing all the exits, all the entrances, and they're sealing up the entire country right now, which will make it very, very difficult for the deep state. And it looks like they're done for in this area. And this is going to happen to many other countries because remember, their agenda was to have regime change in all these countries. Now it's all falling apart, and the people are taking back control of their countries. Now let's get into some of Q's breadcrumbs here. That Q has posted many more posts since we last spoke, and this is post 1666, July 3rd. Q put up an article by Breitbart saying Nunes refers 10 Obama officials to House Judiciary and Oversight Joint Task Force. Q went on to say, Riri drops Five Eyes, capital F, V-E-Y, will be extremely important going forward. Parentheses, UK primary, turn taken, FBI, Department of Justice, to state, Hussein, White House, CIA, other appointment start, to foreign bad actors. Brackets again, Rod Rosenstein, deadline. We have the server, Q. So let's go through this. Nunes, in a letter to the chairman of both committees obtained by Breitbart News, listed 10 current and former U.S. officials who may have received or provided information relevant to their investigation. Interviews with those officials could reveal whether the FBI lied when it said it began investigating the Trump campaign on July 31st, 2016, and after it received information from Downer after stolen Democratic National Committee emails were published on July 22nd, 2016. Normally, intelligence passed on from a member of the Five Eyes Alliance, Australia, Canada, New Zealand, the UK, and the US, to another member comes through an official channel for intelligence sharing. However, Nunes, upon reviewing the document that formally launched the FBI's investigation, said there was no intelligence shared through that official channel, meaning that the intelligence was shared through unofficial means. Nunes' letter also lists State Department officials in Washington who have admitted to receiving information from ex-British spy Christopher Steele. Those officials are Jonathan Weiner and Victoria Nuland. Nunes' letter also lists Colin Kahl, former National Security Advisor to former Vice President Joe Biden, another former Biden aide, as well as former top Clinton State Department aide and campaign official Jake Sullivan. So an anon gives us a quick Q review so we can easily reread all in one go. Five Eye, which is F-V-E-Y, and Five Eyes are mentioned in 3 relevant posts. So this is on April 16, 2018. Reread Five Eyes. Avoid U.S. data collection laws. Hussein. Public dossier. FISA. Not public. Five Eyes. UK. Australia POTUS targeting. Using pushed RUS decoy meetings. Russian meetings. Campaign insertions. Hussein, Hillary Rodham Clinton, Loretta Lynch, Brendan Clapper, UK, Australia assist set up. May 11th, 2018. Example, Clinton Foundation. Post-election loss. Layoffs. No access control equals no donations. Today, New Zealand donation restart. Others, why? 1. Selling secrets. 2. Selling future access. Regain control power. 3. Selling silence. Read below slow and carefully. 5I. Why do former dignitaries still hold SEC clearance? U.S. to U.S. logged, flagged, recorded. U.S. in New Zealand, there are no logs, no flags, no records. U.S. security clearance, authenticative, 5I view plus doc take. Read above slow and carefully. Basically what Q is saying, there are no logs, no flags, no records. U.S. in New Zealand. Why do we allow former dignitaries security clearance? Welcome to the deep state. Future to prove past. June 11th, 2018. Ask about the letter, however. A Department of Justice official said Rosenstein is currently representing the United States in a brief, unrelated visit to a foreign nation, one of America's key intelligence partners, indicating he would plan on responding during the previously scheduled briefing on Thursday. And there's a link to Fox News. Department of Justice refusing to give Grassley access to agent who interviewed Flynn. This statement should ring alarms. Hint, those responsible for spying, 5I, are present. Panic, Q. So we see right now that Q is saying there are no logs. And I think what you're going to see in the testimony that follows from all this is the revelation of what these unofficial channels were, specifically who they involved. I believe Q is saying that the UK was the primary point of contact for those looking to ferry information along these unofficial channels, and this will implicate the FBI, Department of Justice, CIA, and Obama's White House. Rosenstein's deadline is Thursday, so we'll have to see what happens on July 5th, which is Thursday. And Q went on to say, we have the server. Post 1667. Q put up everything that was posted in the last post and said the following. Normally, intelligence passed from a member of the Five Eyes Alliance, Australia, Canada, New Zealand, the UK, and the US, to another member comes through an official channel for intelligence sharing. However, Nunes, upon reviewing the document that formally launched the FBI investigation, said there was no intelligence shared through that official channel, meaning that the intelligence was shared through unofficial means. Basically, Q's just laying it out there, telling us that they're using unofficial channels, which will implicate Obama, Hillary Rodham Clinton, and the rest, because this is the deep state. Nothing is on record, but they have the server. They have the information. 1668. Q put up post 1666, post 1667, and said the following. Read below slow and carefully. And actually, this is a post from May 10th, Q put up. 5I, why do former dignitaries still hold security clearance? U.S. to U.S., logged, flagged, recorded. U.S. to New Zealand, no logs, no flags, no records. Basically telling us over and over there would be paper trails, but we don't have the paper trails. But they have the data, they have the information. So Q is basically saying that he allowed Hillary Rodham Clinton and all the others to go ahead and do what they've been doing like there's no problems. Remember, the sealed indictments, they don't know they're indicted. They're in secret. There's a reason for that. So they don't know what's going on. Hillary was allowed to go to New Zealand. She wasn't getting away with anything. Her phone was comped. They were following her with satellites. They had people following her all the time. And they were watching what she did. The same with all the other actors. they were doing the same thing, allowing them to dig the hole much, much deeper to gather evidence. So let's move on to post 1669 here, July 3rd. And now Q put up post 1238. Not official product, Five Eyes. Listen carefully. No evidence to support POTUS targeting. None. Do you understand the gravity of what's unfolding? Evil and corruption. She had to win at all costs. You know why. How do people vote for these people? And Q is saying the corruption goes all the way to the top. Post 1670. 4 a.m. What will tomorrow be? Coordinated. What will happen to Stormy? Fake news Q. Now, Q, when he refers to 4 a.m., this is when the mainstream media puts out their fake news. And they all coordinate. And what we're seeing is they're getting off the story of Stormy Daniels because that was completely fake, phony, and false, and there's nowhere to go with it. It just died. Now they're moving on to the story with Michael Cohen. And what Q is showing us is at 4 a.m., they all coordinate and they put out the same stories. And they listed the stories from the Washington Post, CNBC, NBC News, The Guardian via Yahoo News, The Daily Beast, CNN, The Hill. And if you look, they all come out around 4 to 5 a.m. And the stories read as follows. Trump lawyer Michael Cohen says his family, not the president, is his first loyalty. CNBC. Michael Cohen, Trump's former personal lawyer, says he now puts family and country first. NBC News, and this is at 5:12 a.m. Michael Cohen says family, country have my first loyalty. What about Trump? The Guardian, 5:07 a.m. Michael Cohen hints at flipping and says first loyalty to his family, not Trump. And this goes on and on and on. So Stormy Daniels is old news. It's not sticking anymore. So they are shifting tactics, shifting gears towards Michael Cohen. And look how the mainstream media, they all just fall in line. Well, we'll see what happens when Thursday hits. Let's move on to post 1671. And there was a tweet by Lee Stranahan, and Q put this up there. This is July 3rd. Breaking, I'm at the federal courthouse, and it seems that Imran Awan's plea deal says that he cannot be charged with any previous nonviolent crime. Now Q says, think logically, think IG report, think what's missing. Do you think this was going to be litigated in this setting? Case that implicates some of the most senior elected officials. Treason is being handled by the appropriate office. Think national security. Now, when we look at this, think logically, they weren't going to try Imran in this setting for treason. What's in the IG report that hasn't been released? Well, all the redacted information, all the classified information. And remember, Q says, think national security. So let's move on here. Post 1672. Q put up a tweet by Trump, says, our Justice Department must not let Awan and Debbie Wasserman Schultz off the hook. The Democrat IT scandal is a key to much of the corruption we see today. They want to make a plea deal to hide what is on their server. Where is server? Really bad. Now remember, Q says, we have the server. And Q came back and said, logical thinking. Why was the case against Awan filed under bank fraud, all caps? The result today, RE:, all caps, bank fraud. See last connect, the swamp is being drained. Well, I think the answer might be in the president's tweet, where they're making a plea deal. They're making a plea deal to hide what is on the server. And I believe Imran might have made a plea deal and just accepted the bank fraud charges. He might have flipped because he's the low man on the totem pole. They're going to use him to get the others. So let's look at bank fraud, because when you think of bank fraud, you think of money laundering, you think of follow the money. So under 18 U.S. Code Section 1344, bank fraud. Whoever knowingly executes or attempts to execute a scheme or artifice to defraud a financial institution or to obtain any of the monies, funds, credits, assets, securities, or other property owned or under the custody or control of financial institutions by means of false or fraudulent pretenses, representations, or promises shall be fined not more than $1 million or imprisoned not more than 30 years or both. Let's move on to Post 1673. July 3rd. An Anon put up, and Q reposted this. Anon's law fag here. REA1. Anon's already figured this out by I can add that I have suspected for some time that the state charges were just a delay tactic until the main indictments are unsealed. It's also possible, or even likely given the way they treated A1, that he will be a prosecution witness, since they would have never let him wander otherwise. Lots more winning in store. I'm enjoying the show. And then Q put up this response, matters of national security, and put up a link. Now, this link is to the Classified Information Procedures Act. And if we read this, I'll read a little portion of it and then give you the summary part of it. Definitions, pretrial conference, protective orders, and discovery. After a criminal indictment becomes public, the prosecutor remains responsible for taking responsible precautions against the unauthorized disclosure of classified information during the case. This responsibility applies both when the government intends to use classified information in its case in chief, as well as when the defendant seeks to use classified information in his or her defense. The tool with which the proper protection of classified information may be ensured in indicted cases is the Classified Information Procedures Act. See Title 18 U.S.C. Application Number 3. SIPA is a procedural statute. It neither adds nor detracts from the substantive rights of the defendant or the discovery obligations of the government. Rather, the procedure for making these determinations is different in the balances the right of a criminal defendant with the right of the sovereign to know in advance of a potential threat from a criminal prosecution to its national security. So, I'm going to read you the Cliff Note portion of this to explain what all this means. SIPA provides a mechanism to resolve the trade-offs that arise in connection with the use of classified information in criminal prosecutions. Classified information, as defined in the Executive Order of 13526, covers such information whose unauthorized disclosure of the information reasonably could be expected to result in damage to the national security. There are three main ways that classified information might come up during trial. The prosecution may need to use such information as part of its case. Number 2, the defense may need to do the same. Number 3, the defense may need to receive classified information in connection with discovery. A particular problem for the government arises when the defendant claims a need to disclose classified information if prosecuted, and the government is faced with a choice between harming national security by allowing its disclosure or dropping charges. Many courts have accordingly noted that SIPA was primarily enacted to combat this problem, known as gray mail. Now, it mentioned Executive Order 13526. This Executive Order, 13526, was created in December of 29th of 2009. This order prescribes a uniform system for classifying, safeguarding, and declassifying national security information, including information relating to defense against transnational terrorism. Our democratic principles require that the American people be informed of these activities of their government. Also, our nation's progress depends on the free flow of information both within the government and to the American people. Nevertheless, throughout our history, the national defense has required that certain information be maintained in confidence in order to protect our citizens, our democratic institutions, our homeland security, and our interactions with foreign nations. Protecting information critical to our nation's security and demonstrating our commitment to open government through accurate, accountable application of classification standards and routine, secure, and effective declassification are equally important priorities. So it looks like this part of it where Q is pointing us to this SIPA rule, it looks like they're going to be using this later on because what's in the IG report? A lot of classified information. What was Imran doing? Selling classified information. And I think this has everything to do with that. Let's move on to post 1674. Q put up, add another to the list, gave us a link to an NPR link, which says another top Justice Department lawyer steps down following earlier departures. Q wrote conspiracy, coincidence. And what does the article say? Well, the Department of Justice headquarters in Washington is losing one of its most experienced top leaders, the latest official to leave for work in the private sector, Scott Schools, a top aide to the Deputy Attorney General. And it looks like he's planning to leave the Justice Department at the end of the week. And Q is saying conspiracy, coincidence. No, I think everyone is jumping ship right now, getting out and protecting themselves. And when we look at everything that Q has been telling us, everything is being set up. And these individuals, because there are sealed indictments, they don't understand that they're under investigation. They think this is business as usual. They're not going to be running. They're not going to be hiding as of yet. They're going to continually do what they do best, and that is working for the deep state and pushing their agendas. And I think what they have right now is a lot of information. I think they have information on the server. I think Imran is now working for the White House. Imran was brought up on bank fraud charges. I think what they're doing right now is they're following the money. And everything else is classified. Everything else is going to be done in a different court setting. This was not the place to have it. Now, what this has done is this has let the guard down for many of those people in the deep state, thinking, oh my God, he just got off. There's no problem. There's no evidence anywhere. And all he got was bank fraud. So we're in the clear right now, which really isn't a good way to think because it's a complete and utter setup. And we can see right now something big is going to happen on Thursday, July 5th. We'll see what happens. And moving forward, we're going to see a lot more of this come out. And I think the deep state is being slowly pushed into this corner. And I don't even think they realize they are being pushed into this corner. And once they're in the corner and they have enough evidence, guess what? Game over. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.